Hey, good evening. Welcome back to Toilets to Titles. Justin Stevens, and tonight we have a special guest on the show. Somebody that has helped me win a lot of money this past season with his brain and his know-how. And I've been reluctant to tell him that until recently because I thought maybe I might get a bill in the mail for his services, but before I introduce Joshua, I'm going to explain real quick. We're missing a couple of our co-hosts here, as you might see. Um, uh, I kind of teased last episode that we were going to have Joshua on, and part of that reasoning was because Joshua and John were two guys that I followed a lot last season that helped me out, and I think that there is some parallel paranormal um, uh, something going on, something crazy right now that just will not allow these two to be on the same show together. And I think it's for the better of everything because the awesomeness would probably just explode. So, but no, really, John has a fantasy football flag football tournament this weekend, and he's just pretty busy. And Nate got called into work, so it is what it is. But like I said, we got Joshua on. Josh has become a friend of mine over the last year and a half. I follow all of his stuff. He is a friend of the show because he retweets all of our stuff and has been a constant listener and supporter of me. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him now. Josh, how's it going?
Great. About time I got on here. Thanks.
Yeah, to episode 9. I got you in before double digits.
Nice. I'm in under the wire. Hey, it's my pleasure to call you a friend. I know you were like the first guy to reach out and jump in when I made the Fusion FFB group chat. I didn't know I'd seen you around Clock Dodger stuff, but yeah. So it's been great getting to know you, and it's been a lot of fun watching you kind of develop all this stuff and get into it yourself. So I love it.
Yeah, well, seeing you do what you do is part of my inspiration. So, especially with that group chat that you have put together, you put together some great guys in that group, and we all support each other and we all lift each other up, and it kind of helps keep each other motivated. So I'm really glad you put that together. But you all can find Josh down there at the bottom. You see the banner there at Fusion FFB. Also, his website, fusionffb.com. We're going to be talking about that quite a bit this evening. You can find us at Apple Podcast, Podbean, your YouTube, Periscope. You can email us, toiletstitles@gmail.com. And then, of course, our individual Twitter handles at Coach Sheps, at Justin FF _ and at Nate _Dirt19, or our show at Toilets to Titles. So pretty self-explanatory there. Let's see. I also wanted to throw this on here mostly for John whenever he goes to edit the video later, so that he can put Josh's YouTube channel in the notes there. So there it is. John, you can pause that and type that in there for us. And yep, definitely some not mowing. That was just a loud vehicle. You might hear some birds in the background, though. It's because I love to sit outside for these shows.
My neighbor's mowing his yard now, of course.
Oh, I thought you were talking about mine.
No, mine.
I can't hear yours at all, so that's good.
Good.
Hey, also real quick, I want to mention that for the Listeners League, we have 2 spots open still for the Listeners League. And Josh, actually, I wanted to ask you about the Frankenstank League.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for us to come up with listeners than we do friends of the show. And now that you've been on the show and you constantly retweet everything, would you mind if I moved you over to the friends of the show division rather than the listeners division?
I expected nothing less. I mean, as much as I kind of wanted to slip in as a bit of a ringer, I know that you have some pretty good other players in here, so I don't think that was going to work either way.
Right on. I appreciate that. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. I want to talk first about your website because your website has been a good form for me personally. You allow me to write articles on your website. That's fusionffb.com. my most recent article on there was about the tight end landscape. I also wrote an article a couple months back or a few months back, pretty much about a week before the Colts signed Phillip Rivers. And that article was all about all the reasons why the Colts were not going to sign Phillip Rivers. So I am not too ashamed to say that I am wrong on a regular basis. So, but we have fun doing what we do, and you give me that form for that. So I appreciate that very much. But on your website, you offer several different things other than just articles. You also offer some downloadable items, such as the Fusion Flex, which is something new. You haven't really you haven't put it on the website necessarily just yet. You did put some scoring possibilities in there, if I remember right. There was a spreadsheet for it, but I wanted to kind of tease this a little bit because you have some great guests on your show. I know you had Peter Howard on your show, and you've had John Hogue on your show, and you were here recently with John Hogue, actually, and you kind of teased the Fusion Flex. Can you kind of give us a quick rundown on what you were thinking behind the Fusion Flex and where they can go to find that show and listen, because it is extremely interesting.
Yeah, the Fusion Flex was just basically taking the Scott Fishbowl scoring. And I got a little person knocking down my door here, actually.
Oh, a little
I might have to take care of that real quick.
Yeah.
But basically, it was taking the Scott Fishbowl scoring and kind of retweaking it a little bit into something I wanted to try. But if you've got anything you want to talk about, you better do that right now.
Well, I do know that you were talking about doing a league with the Scott Fishbowl, or with that Scott Fishbowl scoring, but only with a few other interesting rules. Like you had mentioned something about only having one quarterback and then all super flex after that, and several other things. So. Or possibly just no quarterback and just all super flex, or even one wide receiver, one running back, one tight end, and then the rest super flex, just to kind of help balance out the importance of the quarterback compared to the importance of all the other positions, because quarterback is the most important position on the field, but sometimes it has a little bit too much value in fantasy football. So some of those ideas you were kicking around to help balance out the importance of the position. So it just sounds extremely interesting and something that sounds like a lot of fun. So guys, just keep following Joshua and listen to his podcast, and especially the part 1 and part 2 with John Hogue. Excuse me, where he really describes all that sort of stuff, and it'll be interesting. I'd like to see how that league works out, and I know there's a small chance I might be in that league. I've got so much on my plate right now. I decided to dial it back a little, but like I said before, if you need somebody to fill it out, I'm there for you.
Mostly, I just wanted to try and see what it looked like if I could make a league with scoring that allowed us to treat the quarterbacks like we treat any of the other positions. That was kind of the main goal.
Right. And that's because you're always thinking, you're always innovating, you're always trying to stay ahead of the game. Speaking of which, are you planning on, with your podcast, are you planning on doing the I forget what you called it, but kind of like where you tried to predict a couple weeks out? Like if it's week 8, you're trying to predict the guys that you need to pick up now because they're
next
going
week
in week 10. Right.
Next week tonight. That is I started doing that in season last year, kind of as a little bit of an experiment. I wanted to try something new, do something different. And I wanted to see if it actually gave us any edges, any benefits. And I was actually really happy with the results. So I do plan on doing that again. As far as there's lots of things you could do during the season. You can do waivers, you can do all these different things, start sits. My schedule doesn't really help me. I can't really do start sits, Saturday night, Sunday morning. I can't really do that. So it's kind of like I tried to find something that I could do that wasn't already being done by like 20 other sources. So this was my solution, and I'll be doing it again. Yeah, exactly what you said. I literally am looking a full week ahead, and so I talk about waiver moves. I talk about trades you should be trying to make now, based upon players that are about to break out or upcoming schedule, tough matchups, things like that. And that in particular was a big edge because um, when you're trying to make a trade with somebody, it's they're always kind of thinking, okay, why are you trying to trade this guy away? If you wait until you're right up against it, it's obvious. Oh, he
Yeah.
has a bad schedule coming up. But if you do it a full week ahead, they don't see it coming. They still see this great matchup they have coming, which means you might lose out on that one great matchup. But you just have to figure that how it works for your team.
Right. For the long term. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, you were right a lot more than you were wrong. And I mean, listen, guys, like he would discuss this player that was only owned in like 13% of all leagues and say, go pick him up now because after this week, he's going to be a hot commodity. And a lot of times that's exactly what would happen because he knew he was going to have a big week that week. So even though you didn't feel comfortable starting him that week because maybe the matchups were or whatever, like you discussed, but then he would have a big week. And as he's a hot commodity elsewhere, you already have him on your rosters. So if you do that again this season, I think, I mean, obviously I'll be tuning in anyway, but I think that'll be a big hit with any new followers you might get. The number one thing that you do though, or that you did last season that really helped me out was the singularity. And the singularity is essentially it's a player by player and team by team breakdown of stat projections and fantasy projections for every relevant player in the NFL. Um, and what I like about this, though, like I said, it really shows how much work and effort that you put into what you do. Your craft, you probably call it a hobby at this point, but it really is a craft when you put this much hours and time into it. And I mean, it shows. You're giving a prediction for all 3 or 4 of the top running backs for every individual team, every quarterback, even backup quarterbacks if you feel they might be relevant. I mean, just everything right on down the line, and then you break it down to how many points that equals for fantasy football purposes. And again, it was a huge help last season. And but anyway, I want you to kind of discuss that a little bit more than what I have already discussed. If I missed anything.
My process is I start with each team, and I just wrapped up that part of the process. I mean, I'm always going to be updating teams. I still need to tweak some, but for the most part, I have gone through all 32 teams at least once now and compiled that all together. The way I do each team, it informs what you just said. It seems you look at a lot of ranks and they've just got like 300 players or something, maybe 200 even. The way that I do the projection team by team, I start at the bottom, I start at the players, and pretty much any player that gets 10 or more opportunities, targets, carries, they get named on the sheet. I do have like a 5% extra for overflow for some who knows guy comes up. I'm not going to know what happens during the season for that, but
Right.
I add up their totals and then I compare that at the team level to the team averages, to the quarterback average, to what I think he's capable of declining, improving, anything like that. And then you kind of work your way back down again and adjust the individual positional players again as needed to get it to an area. It's look, I call it right up top. I say it's reasonable expectation projections. These are extremely, in a sense, they're a little vanilla. They're extremely median, mean, average. It's not going to have a lot of hot takes. There are a few that end up popping out, and those are the valuable ones. So now that I've compiled it all together, I'm in the process of getting all the sheets and everything to work together again in the way they're supposed to. It's going to pull up all the players. It's going to give them their ranks according to their positional ranks. I have in there the ability to do custom scoring, so it'll be PPR, but then you can also set custom scoring for. I don't have some things that are like yards, yardage bonuses. I don't have those things. I'm not able to do that. But anything like even Scott Fishbowl with the completions and completion sacks, first downs, receiving and rushing first downs are new this year. So that's going to be in there. If you have a league with that kind of scoring, or even if you just have a league that's a tight end premium and you need to change the tight end scoring from regular PPR, you're going to be able to do that in here. And it's going to take all the stats that I've projected, and it's going to now recalculate according to your scoring setting, all their fantasy points. And so that's going to really that's the advantage of this, is it's going to let you see how your scoring settings change. And that's what helped me last year. I was able to identify a few players that then I can import ADP, and I can compare my ranking to ADP. And a couple players really popped off right away. And like I said, my projections weren't like hot takes or anything, but it was just kind of, look, Allen Robinson's going to be good. He should be being drafted way higher than he is in ADP. Sure enough, he did even better than what I thought. Tyler Lockett, he started doing better than I wanted. He ended up finishing exactly where I had him. It was still higher than ADP. So when I get all this together, it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's the thing, when I'm doing the team by team, I don't look at the points. I'm not thinking about the points. I'm just thinking about what these players can do on their teams. And then the fun part happens, what I'm about to do right now, I'm working on, is I get to see how it all plays out. And then sometimes I surprise myself because I look at it, I'm like, oh, wow, that guy has a lot more points than I thought he would have, or has a lot less sometimes.
Right. And this can all be found on a downloadable spreadsheet on the website fusionffb.com, and now there's a tab on the bottom of the website that suggests donations, and this isn't something that you asked me to talk about. This is something that I'm pulling in myself. Please, nobody even think that for 1 second that he's asking or begging for donations. This was all on me because I know the hours that this man puts into it, and he still has a family and a job, and he's living regular life just like the rest of us. So if you find it in your heart, you see that effort that he's putting in, and it helps you like it did me. I mean, I know I donated a very little bit last year. I don't have a lot of money. I'm going to donate a little bit again this year because that's just it's some kind of appreciation. So just consider it. Just throwing that out there. But since you don't want to talk about that, we are going to jump right into the main bulk of the discussion for today, and that is draft strategies. And I got hooked to this because I was reading through some of your articles on the website, some of your older articles, and there are some older articles on there that are kind of timeless. And and you'll see some articles there by Burl Joffrey as well for his the pills,
Bitter pills.
Yeah, the bitter pills, which are extremely entertaining, actually. So, and they're not as timeless because they're a little bit more about direct players and about last season. And I've talked to Burl. It doesn't sound like he's necessarily going to have time to do those articles again this season. Hopefully, some free time will pop open for him because he really wants to. And they are entertaining to go back and read now and see. But anyway, I was just throwing all that out there because if you're at home watching this and you are looking for a forum to voice your opinion out there, Joshua's really been gracious to us to help us out. And do you have anything to say? I saw you were about to talk about.
Well, and Beryl was right on a lot of those, even on some that I thought maybe he was wrong.
Yeah,
he actually turned out to be right on a lot of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, like you said, look, I have a website. I can't guarantee a lot of people go to it or read stuff on it, but I do know if you put good stuff out there, it generally attracts people. So if I'm sure there's lots of other websites and stuff that will do the same thing for you. But if you just want to dip your toes in and try it out, and you don't want the pressure of deadlines or anything like that because there's like zero expectations. I just expect it to be like, you did the work basically. If you want to try it out, let me know. I'm very willing to work with people and give people opportunity to do that because people did the same thing for me, and so I enjoy doing it for others. And what does it cost? It's nothing. I already got the site, so
Yeah, exactly. All right, but anyway, I was reading those old articles, and the timeless ones that I'm talking about are the draft strategies. So that's kind of what we're
yeah,
going to get into today. And the first one I read was about the turns, because last season I was drafting in my big main draft with my buddies. I was drafting in the 12th spot, and you all know, even those of you that are like me that are in dozens of leagues right now, there's always that one league that you have to win, right? So I was reading the article about just focusing on winning my one league. And I ended up getting second place, and that's because I had some things fall at the end. But hey, it was still big money. It's a big money league, and the guy I lost to is a really good fantasy player, and just the chips fall where they fall. And I was very fortunate, very happy to end up with a second place finish. But anyhow, so I jotted down. I went ahead and jotted down some notes for each of these positions that I went back and read it again earlier today, just to have something to kind of strike the conversation. And on the turn, in the article about the turn, you talk about how you just throw out the ADP. It's called the average for a reason, and it's okay to draft a guy way too early because if he's not going to come back to you anyway, then you at least want to get him, even though. So if that's the average ADP, there's going to be other people like you that are going to take him way too early. So there's probably somebody else that are getting them at a really good value later, and it equals out. So, but you did mention something about throwing out the ADP, but outside of that, what are some major advantages or disadvantages to being on the turns?
in a sense, being on the turn, because it's so far between your picks, like you said, you you have to throw out a little bit of ADP because you can't be planning or thinking, oh, I hope this guy's going to get back to me, because you never know. There's going to be someone 3 picks ahead of you who's going to reach for the guy because they like him too. You can't predict it. You don't know. Um, so in a sense, it's a little freeing because we're so used to drafting. Like, have you ever done that? Have you ever gone into like even just a mock draft, right? And you just say, I'm just going to get my guys. I'm not going to care about ADP. I'm just going to pick the players I like, and everyone else is going to think this is stupid. He reached on that guy, but just see what it's like. I encourage everyone to just try it once. Some,
Mm-hmm.
fantasy football calculator. You can do it half against bots, whatever. But just try it, and it's really interesting. You might actually really like your team, or you might find you don't like it, but you're going to learn something either way. So the nice thing about going on the turn is, first of all, you get to double up, which means as much as you can't react to any runs positionally, like a quarterback run, tight end run, because you're so far between your picks, you do have a little bit of an opportunity to actually like push a run into happening. So that you kind of have to try and keep an eye out for that and be a little bit proactive. Try to be ahead of those runs if you can. There's no greater feeling than like being one of the first ones to take a quarterback, and you took it instead of that, wide receiver you wanted. And then like 10 quarterbacks go off in the next 22 picks. And that wide receiver comes all the way back to you because everyone else was busy taking quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, or
There's
somebody extremely similar.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. And when you can pull that off, it's great. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You now have you're now in a position of strength at that position or whatever you took, and now you can move on to the next one, and again just hammer your guys and not worry about what everyone else is doing so much.
Yeah,
um,
you're absolutely right about the runs. I was even in the Scott Fish Bowl. I was at the 12th spot in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I took Dak and Derrick Henry with my first 2 picks. When it came back to the 3-4, there were so many running backs taken off the board that there was just great value sitting there for me at wide receiver. And I knew that the Scott Fishbowl scoring wasn't really conducive for wide receivers this season. So I was reluctant. I didn't want to take a wide receiver in the first 4 rounds, but that value was right there. And I took Kenny Galladay and Cooper Kupp. And I'm especially big on Galladay this year, but I mean, Cooper Kupp is always going to be a steady Eddie, a good guy to have in there. But I also had a good feeling, and I was in the chat with all the 12s from the Scott Fish Bowl, and I mentioned in there that I'm really hoping that by taking my 2 wide receivers that I would start a little bit of a run there, taking them back to back. And somebody even commented that nobody else, there's not going to be a run because everybody else did their research too, and everybody knows that wide receivers aren't valuable. And sure enough, 7 of the next 9 picks were wide receivers. And just like you said, like the running backs that I was looking at weren't there when they came back, but the value of the running backs that were there was really close to the running backs that I was looking at already. So it worked out exactly like you say in your article. So it's definitely worth a read.
And I know you say throw at ADP. You can still look at it. The problem is you just want to look at, I mean, we think of ADP, we look at I don't know which way you do it. I don't like it when it's total numbers. I like it when it says, round 3, pick 5 or whatever. So if you look at a player and he's the 305, right? Throw out the 05 part. Just look at the 3, because what's going to happen is if that player, it goes anywhere in the third, even if it's the 312 at your 301, just take him. If he's who you want, if he's who you like, just take him, because when the draft's all over and you're looking at like your draft report, it's just going to say it's going to show that's your third guy. That's who you got in the third. It's not going to say, oh, you took him at the beginning of the third and it was before ADP. No, throw out the point, everything after the point when you're on the turn. And even, we'll probably get into it, but I broke up the draft into 4 sections. And there's the turn, and then I called the picks adjacent to the turn, both before and after. I called them the whiplash. And both, it's a little bit similar for the whiplash. You can't really worry about anything after the point. Just look at a player. If he's somewhere near that round, he's okay to take if he's your guy. And sometimes we can get a little bit overthink it and be hesitant to pick a guy because, oh, but this guy's 6 picks higher on ADP. It doesn't matter when it's all said and done.
Right. And then when it does work out for you, you can say, see, I took the guy way before his ADP and he still panned out nicely.
Called it.
Nice segue though. The next one we're going to talk about is that next article, the whiplash, where you talk about drafting from the 2-3 position and the 10-11 position. The note I wrote down about this one that it was intriguing to me is how you talk about how this is the one position where you may change who you would normally draft based on the team or the 2 teams next to you on the ends. Talk a little bit about that. That was an interesting read.
Yeah, it's not something you generally want to do or put a lot of emphasis on, but there are some situations where it can really be a valuable tiebreaker, at least. And depending on how predictable the player is being, if you know them, there's a lot of things that go into this, but you can actually get some good values by doing this. So what the idea is that if the first 2 rounds, or even let's say you're at the 302, actually it wouldn't be the 3, we'll go with 4. You're at the 411, right? So you're the second to last pick in the 4th round, and then the guy on the turn is going to pick 2 in a back-to-back, and then it's back to you. That's why I called it the whiplash. I'm not good at naming stuff, but just, it's just like it comes right back to you, okay?
Right, yeah.
So you're going to look at his team and you see, well, he's taken 3 running backs in a row, and a lot of the good wide receivers are gone here. And you're going to look at your team and you're going to say, well, I took 3 running backs as well. I really need a wide receiver here, but I maybe wouldn't hate grabbing this other running back that fell to me. In that situation, the guy on the turn also wants a wide receiver. He has 3 running backs already. So if you play ADP and take the wide receiver, and take the running back, right? He's going to get that wide receiver. It's going to fall to him. But if you look at it and you'd be like, no, there's a clear cut. Let's say it's Galladay, right? There's a clear cut last of this tier wide receiver here. You can make the guy on the end pay the price for his previous picks, right? You can say, I'm going to take this really good wide receiver away from you. And now I'm going to make you reach on other wide receivers that are lesser. And in the process, that running back I was looking at is going to come right back to you on the other side at the 502. So you're going to get both guys and you're going to make his team worse at the same time. So that's kind of the only thought you can have. Again, this is split up from the center out. So like you said, it's both the 2 and 3 and the 10 and 11. It's a little bit more dangerous doing this at the 3 and 10, obviously, because there's 2 picks or 4 picks until it comes back to you. You just do it with caution, but sometimes it's pretty obvious. And if you're really not sure and it's just a tiebreaker, it's a good thing to look at to say, well, I don't think this guy's going to take, he already has 2 quarterbacks, and I don't think he's going to take another one. I don't need to reach for a quarterback here. I can grab another player. For the onesie positions is where you can use it the most. The quarterback and the tight end, if you're in a 1 quarterback and 1 tight end league, those are the situations. I used running back in my example, but actually it's the quarterback and tight ends. They're going to be able to use that the most because there's going to be clear-cut tiers of quarterback and tight end that you are going to be able to cut them off from. Or you're going to see they already have that position filled and they're not going to take more of it.
Right.
Sometimes they do. I've played that game before and it burned me. And I never thought they would take another quarterback. I never thought they would take Andrew Luck away from me. And they did.
Right.
Thank goodness. But they did. At the time, I was not happy about it.
Yeah. Don't forget, you're talking to a Colts fan here, so I don't want to open up the wound. Yeah, no, I know you don't forget. Hey, so the next one is the most intriguing to me for this season. That same league I was telling you about earlier. I am drafting from the 4 spot this year, and a good friend of mine that follows this show, the Toy List of Titles, religiously, he said he's going to be watching this show later after he gets off work, and he's drafting from the 5 spot in the same league. So I still want you to give all the good advice, even though he's watching and he mainly is excited about having the 5 so he can snipe me every other round. But from the 4-5 and the 8-9 is what you call the quarter post. That's the name that's kind of intriguing to me. I don't really understand that one. The whiplash made sense, but you talked about how there's more about taking the value of the players that fall to you, and you can keep like a wider pool of players in mind rather than on the turns where you can only really focus on those few picks there where you're going to be drafting at, like on the turns and the whiplash. There's only a few picks in between. There's a few more picks in between with the quarter post, so you can have more of a range or a pool of players in your mind to choose from, and it kind of helps value fall to you. So that was a very, very solid point that I'm definitely going to be keeping in mind during my draft.
Yeah, the farther you get out towards the ends, towards the turns, the more and more you are trying to assert your own decisions, your own values. You're trying to dictate your decisions to the league and make the league react to you. The more and more you're in the quarter post or next to the middle, the more and more you are reacting, and you want to be water, right? Like you want to. I say in the article, and we'll mention it. I do plan on updating. So the article, the format of it is like the description or the philosophy that we're talking about right now for each position. I'll maybe update slightly, but it's almost copy and paste. So if you've read it in the past years, like it's going to largely be the same points, maybe some new insights and things that I have to add or things I didn't like. Then the second part is I actually apply it to the draft. And so I do mock drafts from those positions and I get a feel for kind of what you're going to be looking at for the picks and the players that fall at you. And that's has to be updated for 2020, obviously. So I do plan on doing that. And so people can look for it when it comes out. That's my project right after the Singularity is finished. I'm moving on to that. So with the quarter pass, what I say here is, and it's something I actually I started writing something actually a little bit more about this, and I don't know how if I'll get into it, but I called it drafting jujitsu or fantasy jujitsu, right? Because in jujitsu, it's like it's called the gentle art, but it's also about being flexible. It's about using your opponent's force against them. You're not matching their force with force. You are using it against them and adapting. And so that's what you kind of your wants to be your mindset when you're more in the middle of the draft or the quarter post, because now you aren't going to be able to dictate to the turn what their positions are, but whatever they don't take, you can take the best of what's left. And you come into leagues right now and we have people talking about, I want to draft 0 RB, I want to do modified RB, I want to do this, I want to do that. When you're drafting at this 4 or 5 position, particularly, even maybe more than the true middle, you have to be ready to go with a number of different strategies depending on what the rest of the league is doing, whatever the room is doing. You have really got to read the room, make your picks accordingly, and you also need to intentionally set yourself up to give yourself more opportunities. So I talk about how you don't want to take, I know going in, I say you got to be flexible, but for your first round pick, right, you're probably looking at a running back at that position. And that's not because I'm saying you have to be robust RB or modified. I'm not saying you can't fade running backs from there on out. I'm just saying it gives you the most opportunities because you take a wide receiver at the 4 or 5. When it comes back around, you've already almost you've now cornered yourself into two things. Either you are taking a running back in the second round or you are doing 0 running back, right? Like you've already now with your very first pick already pigeonholed yourself into just 2 possible avenues.
Right.
And
yep.
You don't want to do that. You want to leave it open, give yourself as many avenues to success as possible. So you take the running back first. Now in the second round, you're free to take whatever value is there. Maybe Kelsey is still there, Kittle, right? Maybe you want to go that route. Maybe you want to double up on the running back, or you want to go more balanced with the wide receiver. But no matter what you pick there, your team doesn't look bad, and you're not now stuck into any one strategy. So you want to continue to set yourself up with that in mind, allowing yourself to be flexible. It's easy to say at the pick, well, be flexible, just take what's best. But then you look at your roster construction, you're like, oh, but I really need a wide receiver or a running back. Your previous picks you need to be thinking about that and setting yourself up to stay flexible and continue to be able to take the best values.
Right. So you all see what I'm saying is there's jujitsu analogies in this man's thinking. Like the wheels are always churning. It's constant with this guy. But real quick, breaking news. Just to update our Fantasy Cares donation from Toilets to Titles. We were followed by @FFBeard on Twitter, and that brings us up to within one more follower of the 50 that we were hoping to get. Because we had determined that we were going to donate $10 a piece, myself, Nate, and John, for every 50 followers that we get between now and I forget when the deadline is. We're definitely going to hit this first one at the very least. So that's going to be $30 as soon as we get one more follower on Twitter. That's @Toilets to Titles, and you be that 50th one to bring us up to, I believe it's 139 followers, which is huge for us since we've only been up for like a month and a half or 2 months. So we're pretty excited about the momentum that we have going. We're gaining some traction, and we thank all the followers for that. But yeah, go ahead and take some money out of our pockets because it's for a great cause. So hit us with another follow. All right, I'm going to lead into the middle of the draft strategies, and I never.
Great name.
Yeah,
name.
it was golden. I told you, you're you're a genius. But before I read your article, though, I never wanted to draft from the middle because I felt like I wasn't getting anything great, like any of the top 5 running backs that you would normally get in a redraft setup. And then also I wasn't getting the best of the second round when it came back around to me. So I felt like there was never any value there. But after reading your article, it's actually the exact opposite. You can take advantage of wonderful value. And so pretty much how you worded it in the in the article is that the middle spots are all about just focusing on you and your team and taking the best player values because there are going to be too many players between your pick now and your next pick to worry about everybody else's team. So essentially you're just drafting your team. Don't even worry about everybody else's. And it's such a great advice because I used that last season in another redraft where I was the 7th pick, and on top of everything else, there was no draft anxiety. You always get draft anxiety in most drafts. I had none that because I was just, you know what, he's the next best guy. He looks good on my team. I'll take him. I loved it. I love the advice. So, is there anything else that I'm missing from those middle rounds that you want to hit on?
No, it's very similar. It's just like you said, just pretend you're drafting against bots and just take your guys. Yeah, the more you get towards the ends, the more you can actually look at other teams. In that middle, don't worry about it because you're gonna get to pick in a sense sooner than everyone else on average, but at the same time, between each individual consecutive pick, round to round, you actually have farther. I know, like you're saying, well, that's not true, Josh, because when you're at the turn, you have 22 picks between. Yeah, but you also have 0 picks between the other two. So on average, it's actually almost farther here. So you just have to pace yourself. One thing I do say in here is, and this goes a little bit for quarter post as well. I think I maybe mentioned it, but you really want to know your tiers and where you have these groups of value. So that's going to make it all the more obvious. You talk about grabbing the value that falls. Well, you don't want to wait until you're in that seat on the clock to figure out whose the value is. You should just be able to look at your tiers and say, well, this is the last 1 or 2 guys in this tier of value. And now your choices are going to should just be down to a couple players. You can't just look at this big player pool and be like, oh, I'm not sure where this is the value. That's where the tiers are going to be important, and knowing where those value breaks are.
Yeah, and that's great advice too, because drafting by the tiers. Because if you're not a tier-based drafter, you really need to consider it, or at least try it. And like you said, try it in some mock drafts or something. Because with tier-based drafting, what I've noticed is that sometimes I might be looking at, say, the wide receiver 7 on my list, and I kind of want him. I want to kind of go after him, but I kind of passed up on him. The next thing you know, the next time it comes around, we have a run on wide receivers, and the next best available is my wide receiver 12. That sounds bad. It sounds like I dropped 5 spots on my list. But if you look at your tiers and points-wise, you have them relatively close, and the 7 through 12 was that 3rd tier in your wide receivers, then you just drafted a guy that has the same tier value as the guy that you missed out at 7, and you got him a whole round later. So it doesn't feel as bad, and the team actually will still it'll look just as good because there isn't that much difference between the 7 and 12. So that kind of takes away some of that draft anxiety as well. And if you guys haven't noticed this about me up until this point, I very clearly have some anxiety issues, but so I do all I can to help relieve some of that.
Preparation helps a lot.
Yes, yes, it does. Unfortunately, sometimes I over prepare, and when it doesn't work out, it frustrates me even more. um, okay, so I think that about wraps it up for tonight. We're going to we're gonna cut out. Is there anything else you wanted to add to the conversation here before we sound off?
Uh, Not much. I will say, like, there's been a lot of emphasis, especially with Scott Fishbowl, and even I made some comments myself, making projections and stuff. It's really easy to talk about these draft strategies, zero running back, whatever. These are all just approaches to help you optimize like your how you navigate through the draft. But what you were just saying about how when you look at the tier and the one quarterback to you, even though it was five later, was just as good as the one that you passed up. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the players you pick. And I can look at a team and be like, you did an absolute terrible job of like your approach of what positions you took when in the draft. But then if each one of those players individually just hits, they're going to do well. And they're going to be like, yeah, you're an idiot. What do you know? My team's great. It comes down to the players. The players are what count. The players are what matter. The all the other stuff that we're doing and talking about here is just try to help enhance and optimize and give you a little bit more of an edge, but you still have to pick the right players. So that's why I encourage you to check out the Singularity when it comes, because that's where we get to look at the players and find those players like I was talking about, identify the Allen Robinson or players like that pop out that you should be taking, the Austin Ecklers that we were talking about last year, right? Those are the kind of things that are actually going to make a bigger difference than the decision of whether to take a running back in the second round or not.
Right, right, absolutely makes sense. Well, hey, listen, guys. I know that Nate is out there working tonight, and he's staying safe. He's going to have a great weekend after he gets off work tonight. I know that the coach is out there stretching and working out and getting ready for his big flag football tournament, where he's going to be hopefully getting some video for us with him playing running back and wide receiver and safety for his team and pulling them to victory. And I know he's going to have a great weekend, and I know I'm going to have a great weekend. I'm moving my son in Bloomington, Indiana. He goes to school at IU, and he's moving from one apartment to the other. So I got to drive all the way down there, about 2.5 hours, to load up all his stuff and take it 3 buildings down and unload it. But that's what we do for our kids, right? And then hopefully catching an awesome baseball tournament for my nephew on the way home. So I'm going to have a great weekend, and I know I'm going to be safe. Joshua, I appreciate you coming on. I hope you're going to be safe this weekend. I hope you have a great time. I also want to reach out to our listeners, any followers and subscribers. I hope you all have a great weekend. Stay safe. And Josh, again, thank you very much for coming on. You have no idea how much this means to me. Really appreciate your support more than anything, but obviously coming on as well. But just thank you.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Right on. And as always, everybody, I want you to remember to just love each other. We're all in this together. Have a great night.